Thank you for stopping by at the Movie Marquee. Our podcast reviews well-known movies and contains spoilers. The podcast may contain mature subject matter and mature language. Listener discretion is advised. Enjoy the show.
Quiet on set. Places, everybody. And action.
Welcome, everyone, to the Movie Marquee. Today's showing is the action comedy Lethal Weapon. With me, as always, is Ken.
Where the hell did you get him? Psychos are us.
And Ted.
What did one shepherd say to the other shepherd? Let's get the flock out of here.
I love good jokes. And, of course, me, Eric. Man, I'm too old for this shit. I really am. All right. Well, we're looking at this great movie, or will it be a great movie? I guess we'll see how our reviews come at the end here. This action comedy, Lethal Weapon. Ted, tell us about the particulars of this movie.
So, Lethal Weapon is directed by Richard Donner, with a screenplay by Shane Black, with a running time of 110 minutes. It was released on March 6, 1987. It had a budget of $15 million and a box office gross of $120.2 million. So, huge success. Lethal Weapon stars Mel Gibson as Sergeant Martin Riggs, Danny Glover as Sergeant Roger Murtaugh, Gary Busey as Mr. Joshua, Mitchell Ryan as General Peter McAllister, Tom Atkins as Michael Hunsaker, Darlene Love as Trish Murtaugh, Jackie Swanson as Amanda Hunsaker, Tracy Wolf as Rhianne Murtaugh, Damon Hines as Nick Murtaugh, Ebony Smith as Carrie Murtaugh, and Steve Kahan as Captain Ed Murphy.
Wow, that's a lot of names that people don't know. Few stars and a lot of people you've never heard of and probably never will. What did the critics say of this one?
Rotten Tomatoes says that this movie is certified fresh with a critic score of 80%. It has an audience score of 86%. Finding negative reviews on this one was a little bit tough as far as our heavy hitters go, because most of the heavy hitters really enjoyed this movie a lot. I'll go with the three negatives first. Bob Thomas from the Associated Press. He said Richard Donner directed with an expert eye for action, but impaired vision for logic. So I don't know where he was going with that. Johanna Steinmetz of the Chicago Tribune said, as action-adventure, it's a pointless, puerile movie. A movie where the heroes are so childish, they try to one-up each other with fancy shots at the pistol range. She gave it a half a star out of 4 stars.
Dang.
Yeah, she didn't care for it. But ironically enough, and I'll get to something in the positive reviews about the Chicago Tribune, Pat Graham of the Chicago Reader summed up their review as, it's empty glitz in search of a style. Disagree with each one of those, really. As far as the Chicago Tribune, because we said that Johanna Steinmetz is from the Chicago Tribune, I don't know if the Chicago Tribune was running two critics at that time, because our friend Gene Siskel of the Chicago Tribune, he loved this movie, and he said that Gibson and Glover make a great team, and some of their early adventures are exciting, but the film runs out of gas as it turns into an extended chase sequence at the end. He still gave it 3 out of 4 stars.
That's actually a very good review by Siskel. I can't argue with that one.
And then Michael Wilmington, who at this time was with the Los Angeles Times, he's now with the Chicago Tribune. He said, at center is the first big, juicy, mythic hero part Gibson has had since Mad Max. And then someone else that we've talked about before, Janet Maslin of the New York Times, she said, the film is all fast action, noisy stunts, and huge, often unflattering close-ups, but it packs an undeniable wallop. And then our friend Roger Ebert from the Chicago Sun-Times. He says, now about that matter of style, in a sense, a movie like Lethal Weapon isn't about violence at all. It's about movement and timing, the choreography of bodies and weapons in time and space. In lesser movies, people stand there and shoot at each other, and we're bored. In a movie with the energy of this one, we're exhilarated by the sheer freedom of movement. The violence becomes surrealistic and less important than the movie's underlying energy level. Richard Donner has directed a lot of classy pictures. My favorites are Inside Moves and Lady Hawk and the original Superman, which is still the best. This time, he tops himself. Piggybacking off of his review, I did find out that Roger Ebert, he also played a huge role in this film's success, because when he and Gene Siskel reviewed it on their TV show, Ebert raved about it and said the film thrilled me from beginning to end, and said it was both a great action film and a well-written drama. He later gave it 4 stars in the written review. Fans who had not been aware of the film, which was released to limited fanfare and ad space in the doldrums of the spring of 1987, went to see it after Ebert's rave reviews and soon widely agreed with him on its quality. So Siskel and Ebert really contributed a lot to the success of this movie.
It's very cool.
Yeah.
Little sidebar. Do you know who Gene Siskel's favorite movie is?
No.
Saturday
Barney's
Night
Great
Fever.
Adventure?
Oh, really? That's
It's his
interesting.
favorite movie of all time. He loved that movie so much that he bought the white suit at auction a couple years later.
No
Yep.
way, really?
Mhm.
That's cool.
Now he is obviously
really
his
cool.
passed, and the suit
Right.
was sold before his passing, so someone else has it. But yeah, I saw this documentary on Saturday Night Fever a couple weeks ago, and they had like a 10-minute part on Gene Siskel's love of this movie.
He should have been buried in the white suit.
Right, I know he wasn't though. I think he sold it before that time, or maybe I don't know when he sold it. He paid $9,000 for it in like the late 70s and sold it for like 200 and some odd thousand bucks years later.
Wow, good
Yeah,
investment.
iconic, man.
Makes me question, though, his judgment, if that's his favorite movie of all time. I guess we all have our guilty pleasures, because I don't think Saturday Night Fever is all that.
I don't think it's all that either, but it's one of those things with art. Sometimes something hits you in a particular way, because there's a lot of people that have favorite movies that I scratch my head at, and there's a lot of people that think my favorite movies are stupid too.
Like
Like
Clerks,
Clerks
2.
2.
Yeah.
Exactly. Couldn't have said
Yeah.
it better myself.
Ken, tell us about the plot of Lethal Weapon.
Lethal Weapon. Sergeant Martin Riggs has become suicidal and erratic following the death of his wife. Some believe Riggs is faking his psychosis to be forcibly retired with a generous pension. His captain partners him with veteran homicide sergeant Roger Murtaugh, who just turned 50. Happy birthday, Roger. Riggs and Murtaugh do not get along, as Murtaugh is equally dismissive of Riggs' mental state, but is eventually convinced Riggs is truly suicidal. Murtaugh is contacted by former Vietnam War friend Michael Hunsaker. Michael wants Roger to help his daughter Amanda escape her life of prostitution and pornography, but Amanda apparently kills herself by jumping from an apartment balcony before they could meet. Her autopsy shows she was poisoned, indicating that she was potentially murdered. Riggs and Murtaugh attempt to question her pimp, but are assaulted after finding drugs on the premises, which forces Riggs to kill an assailant to save Murtaugh's life. My hero. Their final lead is Dixie, a prostitute who witnessed Amanda's death and whom the pair believed may have poisoned Amanda. Dixie's home explodes before she could be questioned. Riggs locates components of a mercury switch explosive among the debris. It's especially explosive, Riggs recalls, being used by the CIA mercenaries in Vietnam. The suspect who killed Dixie is seen by a neighborhood child wearing 3D glasses. The child notices that the killer has a similar elite special forces tattoo like Riggs. Murtaugh suspects Hunsaker is lying. Shame, 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 know your name. Riggs and Murtaugh visit Hunsaker during Amanda's funeral, which has plenty of eggnog. He reveals he worked for Shadow Company, a defunct CIA paramilitary unit which secretly ran the Vietnam War out of Laos and took over the substantial heroin trade in the area from the natives. After the war, the reformed Shadow Company began shipping large quantities of heroin from Asia to the United States under the leadership of retired General Peter McAllister and his right-hand man, Mr. Joshua. Hunsaker initially called Murtaugh to confess and turn witness against Shadow Company. This was before McAllister had Amanda killed in retaliation. Joshua arrives in a helicopter and shoots Hunsaker and the eggnog to death. Joshua later attempts to kill Riggs in a drive-by shooting, but Riggs is saved by his bulletproof vest. Riggs' death is faked by him and Murtaugh to give him an advantage. Concerned Murtaugh knows too much, Shadow Company kidnaps his daughter and forces Murtaugh to meet with them. Riggs provides sniper support to help Murtaugh and his daughter escape, but all three are captured and sent to a nightclub basement, a Shadow Company front. I guess they were shadow dancing. Riggs and Murtaugh are tortured for information until Riggs escapes, kills several Shadow Company members, and frees Murtaugh and his daughter. Murtaugh kills McAllister, but Joshua escapes. Deducting Joshua will seek revenge at Murtaugh's home, Riggs and Murtaugh ambush him. Riggs defeats Joshua in a brawl, but decides not to kill him. Police officers take Joshua into custody, but he breaks free. He takes the officer's gun and attempts to shoot Riggs and Murtaugh. The pair return fire, killing Joshua. A short time later, after visiting his wife's grave, Riggs shares a Christmas Day meal with Murtaugh and his family. Riggs gives Murtaugh a hollow point bullet he had been saving to commit suicide, as he no longer needs it. What a lovely gift. Merry Christmas. The end.
Very nice. I liked your little commentary there.
I really wanted to know why there was just so much eggnog at a funeral. I mean, they had tons of eggnog there. Because when I go to a funeral, what I want people to have is eggnog.
Christmas funeral in Southern California. Eggnog.
Guess
what else
so.
would you have?
It's weird. I didn't really make that connection until you brought it up, and now I'm like, yeah, there was a lot of eggnog there. That's weird. All right, Ted, when did you first see this movie?
Here again, I was left trying to remember when I first saw the movie. I'm sure that back when I was younger, my dad would have rented this movie. So it was probably somewhere around there. And it's played a lot on TNT and other basic cable stations throughout the years, too. So I've caught it here and there. As an adult, I haven't really sat down and actually went through and dissected this movie. So I guess you could say the first time I really watched this movie, I guess, was for the podcast, because everything else is just either basic cable or I was too young to appreciate it.
That's wrong to see a movie for the first time on basic cable.
Yeah, I was young.
I know.
It's funny because eventually we're going to talk about Lethal Weapon 4, and that's one of the ones that I remember seeing right when it came out.
Which is ironic. I've seen the first three. I've not seen the fourth one, so that's going to be new to me.
I was a big Chris Rock fan.
Ken, we know you saw it on cable for the first time. That's a given, right?
Yes, I saw the other movies in the theater. This one, I actually did see it on paid cable because, well, I was under 18 at that time, and I would have required an adult to go see it because it is rated R. But, yeah, watched it a lot, over and over and over again. Couldn't get enough of this on paid cable. Did catch it the other day. I was just flipping channels and saw that it was there. And to be honest, it's not that bad on basic cable, but they do change a lot of the words. Mm-hmm. They must have known that this movie was going to be played a lot on basic cable because it seems natural. It doesn't seem like out of place. Like you don't hear those replacement
words. Oh, they took like 2
two
takes. They did like a clean take and a dirty take because they knew, during that time period of the late 80s, a lot of those movies knew that they were going to be played on cable and the language was going to be an issue, so they did take the dual take. It does make it look a little bit better than when they dub in a word over it, but still lousy.
I'm thinking about the scene when they're in the garage and they're talking about being partnered up and basically how they're saying that they're fucked. They don't say that in the basic
what do they say?
version. I don't remember exactly what they said.
We're screwed.
Probably something like that, but it sounded so natural that I was like, wow.
Yeah, different takes.
That's odd.
Okay.
How about you, Eric? When was the first time you saw this?
Not a clue, man. I honestly have no recollection of seeing this movie for the first time. I've seen it probably 10 plus times over the years. I think I have a VHS copy originally that I owned that I watched it. I know I didn't see it in the movies. I probably saw it sometime in high school. Right around that time frame would be my guess. Not as exciting as your guys' stories when it comes to first-time sees. I wanted to kick this one off basically with the opening scene, which I thought was pretty bold, if you think about it. For a movie right off the bat, you got an opening scene of just, nudity and suicide.
And Christmas songs.
And Christmas songs, yeah. We know it was a 1980s movie. You do have to have some type of female nudity. That's required.
Get it out of the way, right?
Of course. Yeah. Got it out of the way, and obviously there's a little bit of a Mel Gibson rear nudity in this one.
So the first shot, where they're coming from like the sky shot, where they're going into the apartment window, It was a test shot. And they wanted to do it again later on, but the city wouldn't allow them to do that shot again. The shot that we see at the beginning of them going into the apartment is actually the test shot, and they had to use
No
that.
kidding.
Yeah.
Why wouldn't the city
really
allow
good.
a second one?
I don't know. They didn't say
Permits,
maybe
money.
had some.
That's
Yeah.
interesting.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's not an easy shot to do. You got to probably get traffic diverted and everything like that. They probably didn't want to do it a second time. The first time probably caused too much problems.
Probably right.
Well, they
never
would
really say.
They would probably have to clear the airspace around there too, because it is a helicopter they used to shoot it.
Yeah, pre-drone.
That's how they would do that at the time. So yeah, they probably had to clear airspace, and I bet it was a pain in the butt. to say
And
the
pricey.
least.
Helicopters used a lot during this movie. We see Gary Busey's character, Joshua, kill from it. We see it later on in the desert. The pilot is somebody that Richard Donner has used multiple times. If you think about it, the shot at the end where he's got the helicopter on top of the car,
Limo?
that's a difficult shot.
It's super
but You had to
dangerous.
have kudos to that. But back to the beginning, as far as the opening scene, yes, a lot of nudity. You had the girl showing her breast and Mel Gibson showing his buttocks.
But Mel Gibson showed his butt in a lot of the movies, too. That was a popular thing, because Kevin Costner did the same thing. He liked to show his posterior as well.
He shows it again in Lethal Weapon 2 and 3.
I guess if you've done enough workouts, you got your
if you
butt
got
to
it
look
flaunted,
that good.
right? Is that what it is?
Exactly.
Right? Yeah.
I guess. Let's be honest, at this time, Mel Gibson, he was a huge sex symbol. I don't know when people started doing the sexiest guy alive or whatever, man alive, but he was a massive sex symbol in the 80s. So, like I said, if you got it, might as well. I like that choice because you're immediately engaged, and not just for the nudity. Something's gone wrong that this beautiful woman is going to take a swan dive off the 18th story of this building.
I thought you were going to go with the Mel Gibson butt that actually got you engaged into this movie.
Yeah, that too, I guess, Because I knew that this was an 80s movie, I just assumed that Mel Gibson or somebody was going to show their butt. It was a thing of the times, and Ken, you had mentioned that a helicopter, and if you look back at a lot of these late 80s action movies, helicopters were used a whole bunch.
Last Action Hero comes to mind. There's just a whole bunch of just movies that are helicopters are engaged.
And Die Hard.
Yeah.
Get to the chopper.
Yeah, there you
Get
go.
to the chopper.
Get to the chopper.
It's amazing how finicky helicopters are. Famous people have died in helicopter crashes. And the rate that the movie industry was using helicopters, it's not like using a plane. Helicopters are very touchy as far as how they work and operate.
With the wind and everything, I mean, they can get pushed around a lot.
Exactly. Yeah. That's why that shot of him landing that copter on top of the limo, that's super dangerous. Very big kudos to whoever the pilot was. But it's just amazing that there weren't more accidents as much as they were used.
After we get past the nudity scenes, because I don't think it was needed. It is what it is. I like right when we're getting to seeing Mel Gibson with the drug dealers while they're selling Christmas trees. I'm just enjoying Mel Gibson's presence and trying to buy all this drugs for $100. He's counting out 20, 40, 60,
That's a great
80.
scene. That's a great comic chops of Mel Gibson. He's like, oh, wait, I lost my count. I'm sorry. He's kind of like Alec Baldwin. He's got that natural comedic talent without forcibly putting it on you. It seems like it's his natural personality that he has that kind of comedic, sarcastic wit to him that naturally comes through in his acting, which is one of the things I like about Mel Gibson.
Natural change from being silly to being serious is instant, but it's so natural. I think that's why we love him in these type of movies, because of how he's able to balance that act so well and then just go all Rambo on the guys as soon as everything goes down. The biggest action film that he had up until this point was Mad Max.
Which one?
I think The Road Warrior was out before this.
Oh, that was
too.
like 81, the first one for Mad Max?
I think so, yeah.
Or maybe 79, the Australian. It was a while. And then Thunderdome with Tina Turner, I believe, was 85, because that one I actually saw in the theater. I love Mad Max Beyond Thunderdome.
Oh, Mad Max is awesome.
The Mad Max series was all completed by this particular time. So that was what he was really known for. But he had some really great movies up until this point as well. I liked The River, and The Bounty was pretty good. I enjoyed
River
that
was
one as
Sissy
well.
Spacek?
Yes, and The Year of Living Dangerously. Back then it was a highly regarded film. You don't hear about it anymore, but it's definitely a movie that you guys should check out if you haven't checked it out before.
Well, it was a stupid movie, I know. I think both of you don't like it because I mentioned it before. But I remember Bird on a Wire.
I don't hate that movie. With Goldie Hawn, I don't hate that movie.
Yeah.
It's not that bad.
I kind of do. That was right after Lethal Weapon 2.
Right.
What it is I think you wanted Mel Gibson to be the character he was in Lethal Weapon.
Exactly right.
And then Goldie Hawn was kind of past her prime. Like, if it was made like 10, 15 years ago with Goldie Hawn, I think it would have been different.
She did Overboard.
So. But this is an action movie.
Goldie Hawn's not an action actress.
And Goldie Hawn is older than Mel Gibson, I think by 10 years.
I think it's interesting, though, what you had mentioned about what he was wanting in that role in Bird on a Wire is kind of a connection, and I'm going to tie this back into Richard Donner, is kind of connects to Richard Donner characters. Mel Gibson plays kind of a cross between Lethal Weapon Riggs and his character in Conspiracy Theory, because he's kind of out there a little bit.
I can see that.
I don't know. It was a fun movie when I was preteen. I enjoyed it when I was younger. I haven't seen it recently. Mel Gibson was awesome right in that period.
He
And
couldn't
he's
do wrong. Let's be honest. It was a moneymaker for anything
absolutely
he was
not.
in.
And I'm sure we're going to get to the scene here, but Franco Zeffirelli, the famous Italian director who directed the Hamlet movie with Mel Gibson, he chose Mel Gibson based off of his acting in that one scene where he's got the gun basically in his mouth.
Best scene in the whole movie. At least for acting wise, it's the best scene. I mean, the motions that he goes through and he demonstrates. What's interesting about that is Mel Gibson did not want to do that scene. He actually said no to that scene. And it wasn't until later on in filming that he told Richard Donner, I think I can do it. And they went ahead and filmed that scene. To go through all that emotions that can mess you up mentally,
Yeah.
some actors don't want to do because of that pressure that they're putting upon them.
Yeah, you got to get yourself into that headspace. That's a scary headspace to get yourself into. Ultimately, I'm glad that he did. It's one of my favorite scenes in the movie. But back to the scene where he's in the Christmas tree lot. One of the guys doing the selling of the drugs is Anthony Kiedis' father, the lead singer from Red Hot Chili Peppers.
I could see that now.
Interesting little tidbit,
Picturing the face, I could see that. Yeah.
Yep.
I think it's interesting that you brought up the scene that led to him getting Hamlet, because I think actually he does a really awesome job as Hamlet. It's a very underrated, under-the-radar performance. So again, if you've never seen Hamlet with Mel Gibson, it's much better than you would think it would be.
It's not my favorite interpretation of Hamlet, but it's the one that I remember the most, because I've seen it probably 7 or 8 times. Because Hamlet's my favorite Shakespeare play. He's amazing in it. And Mel Gibson's hair in this movie is pretty spectacular. He's got the perfect 80s, not quite a mullet, but it almost is a mullet. He's very floofy haired.
I actually watched this with my son for the podcast. He just started chuckling and he like, mullet. He's like,
his
mullet.
hair is spectacular in this movie.
His hair is usually spectacular in any movie. Even now, he's got a really strong head of hair. We're talking about the scene with Roger Murdoch being the family man. I like how they do the two different looks of this. You have the guy who has a wife and kids, and he's a family man. And then you have the other one who has lost the love of his life, and he's going through all this turmoil. It's amazing how fast the chemistry even starts. It starts from the moment they're on the screen together.
It's one of those really amazing things that comes together in a movie where you have two people who can come to a movie that have never shared the screen before, but they act like that they've been on screen forever. Gibson and Glover have that immediately. It's a testament to these two guys. I'm actually surprised they didn't do anything outside of these movies together. There was the brief appearance in Maverick.
Which you didn't like.
Right,
Yeah,
right.
because it took you out of that particular movie. But I'm surprised that they didn't have any actual roles themselves together outside of this. Because I think that they could have taken that chemistry and they could have done other types of movies together.
From what I understand, they are decent friends. They're not like, come over my house, we're going to hang type of deal. But all the interviews and everything that I've watched with Glover and Gibson, they have a real like for each other, at least. Even when they're doing the interviews, there's this chemistry that they have about them that is just amazing. With Danny Glover, we were talking about Mel Gibson, what he was doing up until that particular point. But Danny Glover was somebody that I didn't even know about until basically Lethal Weapon. Now, there was one movie called Places in the Heart that I had seen with Sally Field, which I really enjoyed. But outside of that, I did not know anything else about Danny Glover. I found out later that one of my favorite Westerns of that period,
Lonesome Dove.
Silverado.
Wasn't he Lonesome Dove or no?
I don't know if he was in Lonesome Dove or not.
Silverado.
But Silverado is the movie that I really liked. And I don't know if I saw Silverado after Lethal Weapon. I think I did. So I didn't know who Danny Glover was for the most part. But I've been happy to see his career since then. He's been in a lot of things that I've enjoyed a lot, not just this Lethal Weapon series. He's a really good actor. And pairing these two guys up was just genius.
Yeah, we'll forgive him for Gone Fishing.
No, that's true. Oh.
With Pesci. So you talk about the fact that he doesn't do anything else with Mel Gibson, but he does a film with Pesci.
Pesci, yeah. And a bad movie at that.
Mm-hmm.
Didn't hate it, but
Oh, I did.
At the same time, I don't go looking for it either.
Another interesting little tidbit about Glover here. When he was called to do the film screen to get the part for Lethal Weapon, he was actually doing stage acting in Chicago. His acting chops are big, and you can really tell that here too. That character could come off hokey in a way. And the way he plays the character, he's immediately likable. you can feel that he's having these emotions. I think that that's a testament to any actor. When it looks like he's actually feeling these emotions, he's trying to get all the information about Riggs. What people have told him isn't what he's seeing in real life. That inner struggle between, is Riggs legitimately crazy, or is he just putting everything on? That whole conflict where he's trying to figure that out, that's my favorite part of him in this movie.
There's this difference between the backgrounds. That's why I like a little bit about the setup. You get to see the setup of each character a little differently, and they're both on opposite ends. Like I said, you have Murtaugh. He's a family man. He's dealing with his kids. He's dealing with the issues of the day of being a father. And I think they do a great job of setting them up differently and setting up what is Riggs.
They're both legitimately polar opposites of each other. Riggs is living on the beach in a mobile home trailer, shooting a TV if he's pissed off, doesn't care. The place is a wreck. It's just him. He's depressed, suicidal. Whereas Glover, Glover's at the point of his life where he's like, hey, I'm turning 50. I'm getting ready to retire. Family's good. House is good. He's got the boat. He's riding high at that retirement age. So they're really polar opposites to come together. And I think that's what really makes this movie click, is how the polar opposites react to each other.
They make Roger 50, and Danny Glover is not 50 years old.
He's 40.
He's, I think, 40. So he's 10 years younger playing an older guy. And I think that's great that they did that because they're not the same age.
And he pulled it off, too. It's very believable that he is 50.
They had to make sure that he had that mustache on that made him look older.
Right.
And he had a grade on the sides and everything. Going back to the setup of Martin Riggs, so there is this deleted scene where Martin Riggs goes to a school. And in the school, you have the sniper. And he's like shooting people, shooting kids. And Riggs goes up there and he's like, when is the snipers coming to take him out, the SWAT team and everything? And they're like, oh, we don't know when they'll be here. So he walks up like Dirty Harry, basically, while the guy is shooting at him.
That was in the director's cut that I watched. That scene was added.
Yeah. So I saw it in the deleted scenes, and I'm happy it wasn't in the original version. I think that's why they took it out of the original version, was because, first of all, it's at a school, but I like it better where we set up his character with the drug deal. I like that a little bit better than I like him walking up like Dirty Harry and shooting the sniper with the kids.
Both those scenes were in the director's cut. Both scenes, and I thought they actually flowed very good because it kind of showed how much of a loose cannon he was.
The movie went through a couple of rewrites. Shane Black's original screenplay was extremely dark, a lot darker than what it turned out to be. And you're right, Ken, with the school shooting scene. That's just one of the instances where it got really dark really fast.
Yeah, I don't know how you recover from that kind of scene sometimes. I think it puts you in a different frame of mind, and I'm a little disappointed that's in the director's cut. We already see how crazy he is from the drug sale and then going back home and putting a gun in his mouth. I think that's plenty, and you don't need anything additional to it. Kudos for them to at least take it out of the original theatrical release. I think they do a great job of editing this. The time is just used wisely here as far as giving us the information we need. And they don't need to take 20, 30 minutes to set everything up. It flows really well and it moves nicely.
Yeah, you get the point that he's mentally unstable, and he's going to take risky chances like he took with the guys in the Christmas tree lot.
Trees and drugs?
Yeah, he's going to take chances. Yeah.
He's lost everything. He's lost his wife. He really has nothing to live for anymore.
He's on the edge. One thing that I found interesting here was the word on the street, quote unquote, about Riggs is that he's trying to fake his mental instability to retire and get a pension. Riggs is only 30 years old in this movie, and they're saying that he's going to retire at age 30.
Yeah, that made no sense, Dad. I was like, really? That's your game plan? That's what you think he's doing?
That's why I was having a problem with one of your negative reviews that you gave. There are some things that just didn't connect. But here's the other thing. So Riggs talks about messing around with those mercenaries back in 69. Well, here we are. We're in 87. I mean, he can't be 30. He's got to be at least in his mid to late 30s at best. Because I had a hard time understanding what age he really was.
Well, was it? Are we sure it was 69?
Yeah, it was 69.
Yeah.
He would have been 18.
Yeah, let's
or
say
19,
18.
he says, doesn't he?
So he's probably 38, 39, somewhere in that particular area. So that's more viable.
I never made that connection.
The age thing kind of just bounces around a little bit because his wife we see the tombstone and she was like 30, 31.
Right.
But outside of those like little inconsistencies here and there, I think it's a very tight film. I love how they progress the relationship. But again, time is used extremely well here. How they go from saying that we're stuck with each other and I don't like this, and then they deal with the jumper. The jumper scene is cool. Riggs goes up there and tries to talk the guy down. And you just see Roger down below. Not on the ledge. He's already worried and he's already kind of panicking. And then after that, makes the guy jump. That's the last thing we think that's going to happen. We don't think that they're going to jump off the building and land on this inflatable. They do a great job of not showing us that there's an inflatable thing down there.
That was really smart.
Roger's all ticked off. I didn't understand where he was coming from.
Because he's more diplomacy by the book.
Right.
He's not sending a rogue cop up there to handcuff someone and jump down. That's not a sanctioned police move. I mean, let's be honest.
I'm wondering if it's because he's testing Riggs to see if he is trying to get a psycho pension. Because he goes into that establishment, the going out of business establishment, or whatever that is, and he basically tries to convince him to commit suicide right there. It's an awkward situation, but the only thing I can think of why he's doing this is to kind of call his bluff. I think he's thinking he jumped off the ledge to go down because he's trying to collect that psycho pension. And so he's trying to call his bluff, and then he realizes just before the hammer goes down, he's serious. He's not faking. It took me a while to figure that was what he was doing. I was like, why are you trying to make your partner commit suicide?
He's been told on one side that this guy's just a loose cannon. He's out for himself. He doesn't care. He's going to take chances. He's going to get people hurt. And then Murtaugh's told on the other side from the psychologist that there's something seriously wrong and this guy needs help. And he needs somebody to reach out to him and be that strengthening force in his life. You made a very good point. It makes the rest of the movie. And if you took it out, the movie seems weird. But so I'm glad it's there.
And from there, we just see development of the characters. It's just really well done. Roger thinks that his life is over. He might find himself with him when he decides to commit the suicide. And I like how Riggs decides that nothing had happened. I'm hungry. I'm going to get something to eat. After that, he's like, why are you talking to me? I'm a dead man here. They're going back and forth, and he mentions that it's his birthday. And then he's like, oh, happy birthday. Well, it's yesterday. And makes the joke, well, I'll get you a present if we live through this. And it makes them laugh. And right there, that's when the relationship really begins. Wonderful way to start it.
I agree. Maybe I'm reading too much into it, but it's almost like Danny Glover's character, Murtaugh. He realizes that he likes this guy. It's almost like he knows what to do to try to help fix him and try to get him through this where he feels suicidal. You get the feeling that there's a real empathy and caring from Murtaugh's character. And maybe it is because he's a dad. It's after he makes all of those realizations, he's like, okay, I know how to help this guy. And that's when he invites him over for dinner and basically ingratiates him into his family. It's a really nice part of this whole thing. And here again, it's a little thing. Yeah, it's establishing the later sequences that happen, but I took it as that Murtaugh knew what to do to try to help him get through this. And I think it's a very compassionate and very caring aspect of his character that he was able to do that, and he helps get him through this patch where he feels suicidal.
He lets him know that he has something to live for.
But I think it's the exact opposite. I think Murdoch is a little selfish. He's thinking about himself. I don't think he's ever been put in a situation where he's seen all this action. I think he's more of the guy behind the desk. I mean, he goes and visits these places, but I don't think he's ever really experienced what Riggs has experienced. And I think it's freaking him out because he's used to dealing with family problems more than work problems. I think it's a natural friendship that develops. I don't think Roger has that fatherly instinct with Riggs. I think it's a brotherly thing eventually that happens where they look out for each other. He is a little bit older. It sounds like it's about 12 years difference maybe in age. But I think Roger is selfish at the beginning, worried about how this is going to affect him. And that's why he's saying, I'm a dead man. You know, you're looking at a dead man here. And then when that joke happens, his guard comes down. And now they slowly start trusting each other. He brings him over to the house for dinner, a pot roast-like substance. And he gets to meet the kids. I heard these kids are grandparents now. So it's like, man, how old do I feel right now? And I just like how it develops. A little bit more trust as the movie goes on. It's not a full, I trust you all of a sudden completely. It's that earned trust as the movie goes on.
Don't get me wrong. I'm not saying that Murtaugh looks at Riggs as a fatherly figure. I think it's because Murtaugh has dealt with family problems that it allows him to open up and help this guy that he sees that needs help. Like you said, it's more of a brotherly type thing. It's not fatherly. But I think that experience has helped him to see what needs to be done to help him get through this time in his life.
The relationship is just fun. I mean, once we see them messing on the boat and Riggs turns on it, I'm like, that's probably the joke you really want to do when somebody's working on a boat. You don't want to turn the boat on.
Not when it's not in water. You don't want to do that.
But I like the next scene, the next day, where Riggs is there with a cup of coffee.
Yeah.
You know, it's, wake up, we got a job to do. And I really like these guys. And I know they're talking about doing a Lethal Weapon 5, and that kind of sounds silly to me. But at the same time, their relationship that they have developed, especially during this first one, makes me just like this movie. Because this movie does have flaws. But what makes everything work are these two leads here. These two leads are perfectly cast together. I can't say it probably enough throughout this podcast how much I enjoy their interaction. Then they start working together as cops, as partners. They start figuring things out. They go to the gun range, which I think is probably one of the funniest scenes in the whole film, is them shooting at the range. Roger's very proud of what he's done, center mass, and then you see Riggs is like really tight. He's like, let me show you this. In the gun range, he shoots the guy or whatever.
Target.
The picture in the
smiley
head.
face on the target.
And he's humming and during the whole time. He's like, they're relaxed now. And we could be allowed to relax with them and enjoy their relationship. So I'm looking forward to them working together. And then it makes it more believable later on when they go up against the bad guys. Because they really haven't done that yet. They're just kind of trying to figure themselves out and figure out this case.
So the bad guys is an interesting segue here. I've got a few questions on that one here. So when they kidnap Roger's daughter, and they meet in the desert in the middle of nowhere, because they want Roger because they want to know what information he knows, right? Isn't that the whole point of meeting? Why didn't they just kill him in the desert?
They want to know what the cops know, not just what Roger knows, because Roger's a cop.
Yeah.
So they want to probably know what everybody else knows.
And he's going to tell the truth.
And because they're the bad guys.
I know. It's that 80s bad guys.
Yeah.
You know, let's torture them now.
It's a cliche that started with the Bond movies.
Yes, exactly.
And then was parodied brilliantly by Austin Powers. You've set up this elaborate thing that you know is going to go wrong, but it's supposed to kill.
It's like the part where they're electrocuting Riggs. And Gary Busey's characters, that he's talking to the guy who's electrocuting him. They're talking, he's like, if he would have known something, he would tell us by now. So Gary Busey's character walks away to leave him alone.
Right.
And that's basically what you're talking about, Ted. He's leaving him alone to give him an opportunity to get out of that situation.
Right.
And as soon as he leaves, it's easy for Riggs to get out.
Yeah.
Breaks his neck with his legs.
Yeah, and this is one of the other things, too. The fighting in this movie is more recognizable now because of the rise of the UFC. So everybody knows now what a triangle chokehold is. That's essentially what Riggs gets that guy in, and he snaps his neck. That's a disturbing scene, though, where they've got the water pouring down him to facilitate the electricity.
Oh, yeah.
That's, wow.
My favorite part of that scene is when Gary Busey's character gets a little shock.
Yeah, he's like, oh.
You know, they're bouncing him back and forth, and he's just like, ah, just for a second. It made me believe that they were actually really electrocuting Mel Gibson. Gary Busey does a great job of being that evil henchman. Gary Busey is Gary Busey, and which is weird because one of the biggest roles he played up to that time was Buddy Holly in the Buddy Holly story back in the 70s. Gary Busey is a very underrated actor. He really can act, and I think he's the perfect guy to play Mr. Joshua here.
And until he ruined his mind on cocaine.
Yeah, he's a little bit of a shell now.
He has crossed over to Crazy Town. He's not quite as crazy as Randy Quaid from what we talked about in Christmas Vacation, but he's pretty close.
Remember those commercials he did a couple of years ago for, what was it, one of the TVs? The remote?
Yep.
Yeah, he's crazy looking.
So talking about Christmas Vacation, I'm going to give you a relatable thing between our last episode, Christmas Vacation, and Lethal Weapon. The house that Roger Murdoch lives is the same house as their Griswolds live in Christmas Vacation.
Is it? It's the same house?
They use the same house, the same neighborhood, because it's on the back lot.
Oh, it's a manufactured neighborhood?
Yeah, so they're able to use it for multiple things.
Oh, I'm gonna have to watch that scene again. Both those scenes. Okay.
They also use it in the new series WandaVision. So when the house transforms, it later is used as WandaVision. But that street's been used for other things like Bewitched there as well.
Interesting. Okay. Fun tidbit I did not know.
Back to Gary Busey. He is really good here. This is a good role for him. The two major bad guys, the General and Gary Busey, they're just the right amount of menacing without being over the top.
Right.
Even though Gary Busey's character, he teeters on going over the top, but they're just scary enough that you know that they're serious in what they're doing, even though they come up with some convoluted plans about what they're doing. The assassination of Michael Hunsaker, I thought that was one of the best things that the bad guys do in this movie. I thought that was pretty ingenious.
Because you can see that helicopter coming in from the distance. It just keeps getting closer and closer.
That's what bothered me a little bit about that scene. You could see that helicopter way off. Wasn't there any suspicion? The helicopter that's coming, it's not like it's a weather helicopter. It's not your typical helicopter. This thing is kind of like a military helicopter.
No, it's a normal. It's a normal helicopter. It's not military.
Is it normal?
It's normal.
Because he's able to shoot from the side.
Yeah, it's just a normal helicopter.
It's a regular helicopter.
Yeah.
I mean, I still think that would have concerned.
Well, they weren't looking
Riggs.
for it. They're right on the coast.
Well, Riggs is out there though, and he's standing outside and he's looking out to the ocean. I just think he could have saw it and had some concerns ahead of time. And then all of a sudden it pops up like it had been hiding underneath. We see it all the way coming to us up until he gets shot, but then they try to give you a surprise. Oh, look, there's a helicopter. Yeah, the helicopter, we've been seeing it for like the last 30 seconds.
But it's not keynote in your shot. The first time I saw the movie, I didn't even notice it in the background.
Me neither.
I noticed it.
It's a good build-up of that scene.
Yeah.
Subtle.
I like it.
I do like how he meets his demise. When it gets shot, it goes through the eggnog.
Right.
It's kind of cool. And I just think it's kind of just a weird setting. You're at the daughter's funeral, and you're like grilling him about what's going on. It's just all kind of a little bit on the weird side.
With eggnog.
Murtaugh wouldn't have necessarily done that had they not just come from almost being blown up.
And they're really good friends, too. They've known each other since Vietnam. So.
Yeah, and that's why he doesn't bring Riggs in, because it's a personal thing between the two of them. But yeah, the explosion, that was a wild thing, too. Leading up to that scene, you talked about Riggs coming into the bedroom and being, we got to get started. One of the things about that whole interaction leading up to the scene where the house blows up, and it's one of the things I like best in the movie as well, is them trying to convince each other, because you know that they don't believe Dixie did this and pushed her off.
Right.
They're trying to convince each other that this is just on the surface, strictly just a murder. There's nothing else about this. They're both trying to
jumps off the ledge. It's
exactly. Yeah. They're trying to convince themselves, and you know the way they're talking to each other that neither one believes that this is just on the surface.
They don't want it to be true because they're saying it's thin. Oh, it's very thin.
It's very thin. Yeah.
They don't want it to be true, but they know in their hearts that they're heading in the right case. And it's up to the point where they get to Dixie's, like you said, the house explodes. Now they're putting all the pieces together, and now they truly believe that there are. That's what they say even after the explosion. They're like, yeah, thin.
Thin, thin.
And then they talk to the little kid afterwards with the 3D glasses. Riggs is like, we'll put an APB out on Big Bird.
Right.
Big Bird. I was waiting for somebody else to take over the questioning of the poor little kid, because that's uncomfortable as all get out. Murtaugh trying to interrogate this little kid. It's so awkward. You would think because he is a dad, he would know how to talk to a kid, but he acts like he has no idea how to talk to this little kid to get information.
Well, he knows how to talk to his kid. He knows
how to talk to his kids.
He doesn't know how to talk to other kids.
Talk to this kid. I don't know. It's uncomfortable. It's like...
I like it. I think it's perfect. Roger thinks that he is this go-to dad, and hey, I'm the dad. I could do this. I think it's actually done pretty well. And of course, they deny the poor kid ice cream. I mean, that's my biggest problem.
Yeah.
Well, they were trying to get him away from his goofy friends.
Right.
Because his
Don't
friends
tell him
were...
your name, Alfred.
Yeah.
Exactly.
I guess Mel Gibson's tattoo that he points out is actually the tattoo that Mel Gibson already had. He already had that tattoo, and they used that tattoo as part of the story, which is kind of cool.
That is really interesting. That neighborhood that they come into there, I wonder if that's a set too. I seem to remember that being used in other movies. The one that came to mind immediately was Boys in the Hood by John Singleton. because it looks like Compton. They made it look like a Compton-esque type of neighborhood. It looked familiar. Like the house that we talked about that Murtaugh lives in being on a set. I have a sneaky feeling, and I couldn't find it anywhere, but I have a sneaky feeling that that's on a set too.
Is Compton or the set near the airport? Because in the background you see that plane.
I don't know. I've never been to Compton. Sorry.
But you see that plane. I'm wondering if people
I'm
on that plane...
straight out of Compton.
You're straight out of Compton. They're on that plane and that house explodes. If you're on that plane looking out the window, you're
see an
probably
explosion.
thinking... You
Like,
just saw an explosion.
yeah.
I'm wondering if it's probably on the set too, because of the fact that people would be concerned if an explosion happened in their neighborhood.
It just seemed familiar. Ultimately, we can sit there and say, well, yeah, that I really like that. It goes to the overall aesthetic of the movie that there's not a whole lot to not like about the movie. It hits a lot of really good notes. The times that I watched it leading up to the podcast, I never felt forced to watch it.
I will say this, go to the scene where they're checking out the pimp and trying to find out what's going on. Interesting fact about that house, that's Richard Donner's house.
Is it?
Oh, yeah?
No kidding.
Does Joan Severance live in his house? Because she plays one of the two ladies.
That's Richard Donner's homestead, huh? That's Superman money.
I think it might be on the 25th or the 30th anniversary edition. He kind of missed that house because he still had the house, but he added so much to it. He just felt like he put too much into the house, and he liked it what it was back in this particular day. Going back to an even earlier scene where we see Roger watching the video of the girl showering in the nude. And
It's a porno.
That scene was actually shot in Donner's house. One
Good for
cameraman and him. I guess he said his mother came over during that period of time. And basically, so this is what you're doing with your life.
This is your movie career. Oh, it is the late 80s or mid 80s, so.
Here's a question about the sequence, too. They're cutting drugs. The drug of this movie is heroin.
Mm-hmm.
We're supposed to assume that they're cutting heroin inside the house there. The two women are.
I don't know. I think it was coke. I think it was cocaine.
I thought it was coke, too, because it looked like coke. It didn't look like heroin.
But it's the pimp's house. It's not the bad guy's house.
Yeah, I think it's cocaine.
But my question was, are they connected in some way?
The girls? No.
No, the guy who's running the house. Are they connected to Hunsaker in some way? Because wouldn't he have been the one to have given Amanda the drugs?
Possibly.
I don't know.
You think Dixie gave her the drugs?
I don't think Dixie did. I think that guy did. It makes sense because if they're cutting heroin, who's to say that the CIA guys, the mercenaries, didn't pay him with drugs to do this hit?
Maybe.
I don't like the whole idea that she was doing drugs and that's what caused her to commit suicide. I think that's a little ridiculous.
The drugs were laced, apparently.
If we go back to what Roger and Riggs were saying about how Dixie was involved in this, they believed that Dixie actually gave her the drugs. And then that's
what they were trying to convince themselves of.
I still think it's right because we look at the ultimate bad guys. We look at Joshua going and setting up the bomb to blow up Dixie's house. They don't go to the pimp's house to kill him. That's done by Riggs and Roger. I think they're killing the pimp there. We don't know for sure if that's the pimp. We just know it's a guy with a gun. He might be security. He might be the guy who owns the house.
I think we're supposed to assume that it is.
I think so, but it's never really officially said to us if that's who it was or not. But wouldn't you think they would tie up the loose ends earlier? That's the other problem I have with these bad guys. They don't tie up the loose ends until it's a little too late. I'm like, why didn't you just kill off Michael Hunsaker earlier in the film if you were going to do it anyway? Why kill his daughter if now you're going to kill just
because
him?
He was going to go legit.
Because they needed to keep him in the fold. He had one of the major connections.
That's why he reached out to Roger early on the phone, and Roger in the kitchen talking to his wife going, I haven't spoken to him in 20 years.
But why didn't they just kill him then instead of killing his daughter? Why didn't they just not get rid of him?
I don't know.
To keep him in the fold. That they're serious, that they're going to kill him. They probably warned him, and he probably continued to vacillate between whether or not he was going to do this. What probably happened is they tapped his phone, and they realized that he was contacting Murtaugh to catch up with him, and they realized what was going to happen. So to stop that, they killed his daughter.
Yeah.
To show that they were serious. I don't know if they really thought that it was going to lead, because Murtaugh gets that package with the video of Amanda. I don't know if these guys originally thought that they were going to ever connect the pimp to Amanda. That's why they hadn't taken care of him. I have a feeling they would have taken care of him, but Briggs takes care of him for them.
There's also a book with that video, and I'm wondering what that book has. Is it a ledger? What is it in that book? Unfortunately, Roger loves porn. Probably he goes straight to the porn and watches that. We don't know what's in the actual notebook that's sent along with.
Wow.
I would have liked
video.
to have known who sent it. Did Hunsaker send that to him?
It's got to be. That's
was
probably what ends up killing him. He probably gets a second chance because he still has that other daughter. But then when he sends that information to Roger, I think that's got to be what kills him. That just makes sense to me if that's the case. There's a lot of scenes in this movie, and we're not going to be able to go over every single one of these, but I think it flows well. I think they do a really good job of jumping from scene to scene and building up the relationship. I particularly like the scene where you have the drug dealers coming together at the nightclub. He's like, "You're using mercenaries. Tell me if I'm wrong." You know, he's all freaking out because I guess he knows a thing or two about mercenaries. This guy who's trying to do the drug deal.
Did you recognize his voice?
No.
I did not recognize his voice.
He's the lieutenant when Private Joker comes up to Hawaii City. The guy who supposedly went to Notre Dame, and he gets killed immediately in Full Metal Jacket. It's the same guy.
Interesting if we're talking about actors with other credible roles. I guess Darnley Love, who plays Roger's wife, she's actually a singer. She was in a group called the Blossoms and actually sang a couple songs under the group named the Crystals. I don't know if you guys are familiar with the Crystals. They had some hits. Interesting note, I guess the lead singer maybe of the Crystals couldn't make it, so she was there. They used her voice as the lead singer for one of their hit songs and put it on the album and didn't credit her as the lead singer for that song. So,
they were also backup singers for Elvis.
She was one of the Sweet Inspirations? That was Elvis's backup singer, Sweet Inspirations.
Yep.
She's actually older than Danny Glover, so she would have actually fit more of that 50-year-old age at that particular time than Danny Glover would. I like their back and forth acting. It's believable that they're a couple. I love the fact that he makes fun of her cooking and she reminds him that he's being a jerk. I buy their family dynamic. I think the kids do a really good job. Even the younger kids pull it off extremely well. I like the fact that the other movies that they do, they keep the same kids and they just get older and older with the movie. So I think that's kind of cool too. Sometimes you replace kids with other
National Lampoons,
with other kids.
Yeah.
Yeah. But here I like that we basically grow up with this family.
Yeah, it feels more natural. It goes through a natural progression. It feels honest. Whereas some movies that do that, they don't feel honest.
So Rianne has this obsession with Riggs.
Right.
She's got this big
puppy
crush.
love.
Yeah.
But it's kind of weird how even Riggs though looks at her at first. I feel like I get this just a little bit of a creepy vibe at the beginning when they're sitting at that dinner table and he's looking up to see if she's looking at him, and I'm just like,
no, I don't get that creepy vibe.
No,
I get a little bit. I don't think that's what it really is. Even
Mel
at
Gibson
the end,
has his faults, but that's not one of them.
but even at the end when he's giving the bullet, because she's the one that actually takes the bullet, it's not Roger. I could see that they could possibly try to make them a couple later on, which is kind of weird and maybe a little icky. But there was a little chemistry there at the end. When
didn't Roger say, "Stay away from my daughter" or something when they're walking back into the house?
Because Rick says to him,
Yeah.
"I think your daughter has a crush on you," or something like that.
Stay away from my daughter.
And that's a good move that they didn't do that, because they did do that in, I think it was Bad Boys 2 with Martin Lawrence and Will Smith. Or maybe it was Martin Lawrence's sister or something, but it was something about
Family
there. It was weird.
Just talk about Bad Boys. This movie set all those type of movies up, I thought, moving forward. I think it changed how we looked at buddy cop movies, and I think they added that special chemistry, and we get to see that in, Bad Boys. We see that chemistry between Martin Lawrence and Will Smith. And I think it plays off of this Lethal Weapon and tries to do similar things.
Yeah, because isn't Martin Lawrence the Family Man style thing with his wife's car and stuff? Yeah.
Yeah.
Which is the same with Roger in this movie with his wife's car and the other movies.
Is this the first buddy cop movie?
It's not the first, but I think it's reinventing the wheel, basically, at this particular point.
What ones are prior? I'm drawing a blank.
You can't really put the French connection in there.
That's
that
not
wasn't
Buddy
a buddy
Cop.
movie.
No. Buddy Cop. That'd be a great name for a movie. Buddy Cop.
I know, right?
One that comes to mind, 48 Hours. So it's not true buddy cop movie.
He's a criminal, though.
He's a criminal, but it's also playing off of a similar thing. You have a crook and you have a cop, and they have to work together to solve a crime.
Yeah.
So I would say 40 Hours is kind of like
but
one of
that's
those movies.
still right in this era.
It's 82.
Yeah, 82,
Wow.
yeah. Yeah, I mean, I don't know if you want to go with Beverly Hills Cop. That kind of was like a buddy movie right there, because you had the two Beverly Hills Cops with him. So that kind of was a buddy cop
That's
movie.
Eddie Murphy.
But
he's by far the star of that movie.
Well, by far. Yeah, they don't have equal billing, no doubt. Like I said, I think this movie sets things up like Bad Boys, the Rush Hour series.
Yeah.
I think this movie is the reason why we have those movies later on. And then we get the other guys. So the other guys are basically kind of like a little bit of a ripoff.
A little bit.
Yeah.
Well, Samuel L. Jackson and The Rock's character at the beginning of the other guys is a lot like Riggs and Murtaugh. They're larger than life, and they do wild stuff, and they jump off of buildings. That movie makes me laugh.
And then there's the spoof of this movie called National Lampoon's Loaded Weapon, one with Emilio Estevez and Samuel L. Jackson. I like that movie. I don't know if you guys have ever seen it, but it makes fun of Riggs's camper. So when somebody walks into their camper, it looks like in a palace because it's so roomy and stuff. There's just a lot of fun with that. And of course, Shatner's in it as the bad guy, so you got to see it just for the Shatner.
One last thing about how interesting and cool the end of this movie is the fact that Mel Gibson, they actually trained with Weiss Gracie, the father of Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. I mean, everybody now knows what Jiu-Jitsu is because of MMA and UFC. But Weiss Gracie, he actually trained them how to do a lot of the fighting sequences in this movie, especially the end. I thought that was really kind of cool.
It's pretty cool. The fighting, I'm assuming it was pretty realistic. I mean, it had to take a few hits here and
close,
there.
Yeah.
It looked really good.
I enjoyed it a lot. Here again, that's something that could come off hokey and it could come off not right, but it seems real. And this is one of those weird circumstances, too, where you understand why Murtaugh's keeping everybody else away and not letting them take Busey into custody. He's letting Riggs get out all of that frustration and years of mental anguish. I think at the end, Murtaugh knows, too, that he's not going to kill Gary Busey's character.
Until break his neck.
Yeah.
Until break his neck. Until they absolutely have to do that. So there's a trust thing there. But I think it's cool. I like the fighting sequences.
I like him, but as the reviewer that we talked about earlier said, it doesn't make sense that it actually happens. There are some problems, and this is the type of problems that I see. This wouldn't fly during this time frame that we're in now, because everybody would be videotaping, look what the cop did to this guy. They don't know the circumstances.
Oh, yeah.
It probably wouldn't have flown in any time, but it doesn't feel hokey here.
I would say it didn't feel hokey, especially at that time frame. I mean, I like the fight sequence. I think it's really well done. One thing that I like about this movie is it's not action-packed throughout the movie. They save the action for the end, and I know some people have a problem with how the action is done towards the end of the movie. I don't have a problem with it. The only problem I might have is the fact that Briggs doesn't seem to have any concern about shooting his machine gun where other people are around, and no concern about the civilians that are around them when they want to shoot each other.
True.
That's the only problem I have.
It's another action movie trope. Collateral damage around everybody. That's definitely.
I think in some other movies it's been done much better now. Maybe they realized after a certain time period that, you probably shouldn't use your machine gun in front of other people. And it's amazing, like, nobody else got killed.
No one else got hurt, right?
Nobody caught a stray bullet.
And it's amazing that Gary Busey drives through that pole. That pole just doesn't, kill him on the spot.
I know.
Yeah. If we're going for hokey, Riggs, basically, he shoots out the engine of that car, and that car still drives away, even though it's on fire. He shoots that car right in the manifold. The car would have been a brick.
But it still goes.
It wouldn't have,
I know. On fire, it's still
went
moving.
Anywhere.
Yeah.
Or maybe I'm wrong. Maybe it wasn't a large enough caliber machine gun to have busted up the manifold.
If an engine catches on fire like that, most likely it is not still going.
It's not. Yeah, right. It's not going. But yeah, he continues to drive away like Christine and John Carpenter's.
I was just going to say that. Other movies, the car keeps on going even though it's on fire. I think it's funny that every time Gary Busey tries to steal a car, that he has to deal with the driver of that car. You have that lady that's fighting him. I'm like, she gives more resistance to Gary
mind
Busey
if I test drive your Audi?
Yeah. Also, too, that Riggs is able to chase down a speeding car.
Right.
Even though he takes a shortcut, he's still able to chase him down on foot.
I love how Mel Gibson runs, though.
Got a swagger to him.
He's obviously the lead star here.
There's a reason why we have 4 movies here. This movie does a lot of things right. The scene that they're out were in the desert, doing the exchange, and where Riggs is sniping, I don't know if that's the word, sniping,
Yeah.
people away from, probably the 1,000 yards or whatever.
It's probably 600, 700 yards. Because he's a ways away. He's using a really decent scope. The rifle that he uses there is one of only 2 that company made. And that was used in the movie. They actually had to purchase the gun from the company to be able to use it. And it's supposed to come with a tripod, but tripod didn't come in time. That's why they used the stand.
The weird thing about that scene, because they set that scene up, because he talks about 8 to 10 people in the world can make that shot like 1,000 yards away on high winds. But the way that he says it, they're talking and he's talking about trust. He's leaving them after they just been on his boat. And he, for whatever reason, has to give up that information. It comes out of nowhere. It's not like Roger says, hey, how good of a shot are you? He crunches this beer can and has to give out this information. I do it well, He goes, do what? I could shoot a person from 1,000 yards away in high winds. I'm like, okay, thank you for that information. Have a good night. Sleep well.
Right.
So, it's just weird how they did that. So
It
those
is.
are the little mistakes here and there that they do.
What I don't understand about the whole desert sequence is he's using this high-powered rifle. He kills a bunch of the bad guys. But why doesn't he use the gun to shoot the helicopter out of the air?
Or shoot Gary Bruce, who's Mr. Joshua, right off the bat.
Exactly. Because that would have made the most sense to have caused a disruption, would have been to disable that helicopter. And we've already established that it's a high-powered rifle. I don't think it's a 50 cal.
No, it's not a 50 caliber.
But it's still big enough that it should have done some damage to the helicopter that it wouldn't have been able to fly, at the very least. We've talked a lot about Gary Busey and the General and their whole backstory. It was really interesting for me because this is the 1987 movie. And they're talking about things in this movie that a lot of people had considered it just to be conspiracy theory type of stuff, but we've later found out through declassified stuff from the CIA was really running heroin from Vietnam to America, and they were using that money to fuel their various projects around the world. At the time, that's not something that, in 1987, that a lot of people would have known about. It always shocks me when stuff like this comes up into movies, because at the time, in 1987, the CIA was deep embedded with the Iran-Contra affair. They were partnering with the Medellin cartel, which was by Pablo Escobar. They were running cocaine into America at the time too. I know the government, sometimes they do watch what comes out of Hollywood. I'm surprised they allowed this whole idea that these guys are CIA operatives running drugs into America to go on. Some of it was still happening. It's just one of those amazing things to me. And one of the other things about Mr. Joshua, it almost made me wonder about Riggs at some point too. Mr. Joshua is almost like a Manchurian candidate. He's been brainwashed. When they're first introduced to Mr. Joshua, he takes his hand and he holds it over the flame and burns himself, but doesn't act like he feels any pain. That's something right out of MK Ultra, which is another conspiracy theory that ended up after declassified information was provided to the public. Mind control was something that the CIA and the government was actually doing. Now, the theories can get into wild places. It can go off the rails that, Sirhan, Robert Kennedy's assassin, was a Manchurian candidate, and also too, Hinckley Jr. and the guy who shot John Lennon. They've been targeted as to say that there was some sort of mind control thing going on there. That's really deep conspiracy theory stuff. They touch on a lot of things here that are really interesting, and that a lot of people wouldn't have been up on at the time. Or if it was in hushed tones between people that wouldn't talk about it in public because you didn't want people to think that you were wearing a tinfoil hat. And they're pretty accurate on a lot of this stuff. I mean, Air America, what they talk about was a real thing. A lot of these guys saw the opportunity to make a lot of money coming out of Vietnam, where they were just running heroin.
Interesting movie, Air America, with Mel Gibson and Robert Downey Jr. It's a little fluffy.
Yeah.
Like you said, it gives us a picture of what was happening overseas. Like you said, not a lot of people knew what was going on.
Like I said, it was amazing that this made it through the censors. I never read anywhere that anybody had to answer questions about this particular script. Famously, the American government took Stanley Kubrick in when he made Dr. Strangelove, and they grilled him for hours about how he got his information. I didn't read anywhere that they took Richard Donner or the writers of this movie and questioned them as to exactly how they got some of this information, because it's pretty dead on. I mean, they've changed some things, embellished them, of course, for thematic effect. And like I said, this was right in the middle of the time where they were funneling cocaine into this country in 1987, big time. And if you want a movie reference for something like that, Tom Cruise made a good movie in the last few years called American Made.
Very good movie.
Which tackles that particular section of CIA American history pretty accurately about what they were doing.
Had mentioned this on the side. Is this a Christmas movie?
Dun, dun, dun.
Or why isn't this considered a Christmas movie like Die Hard? I don't get it. I mean, I understand, and I totally embrace the idea that Die Hard is a Christmas movie, because I think it's funny. It's a really cool thing. It makes me laugh. But how come this hasn't gotten the same treatment? Christmas is all over this movie.
Maybe Die Hard is maybe a little bit of a better movie. Why?
You think Die Hard's better than this?
I think it is. I think Die
Hard
is
Die Hard came out in what, 88?
89,
89. So right around this
Something
era.
like that.
Yeah, you always hear the arguments about Die Hard being a Christmas movie. I've never heard anyone ever bring up Lethal Weapon as or not as a Christmas movie.
Right.
But
Why
it
is
should, because this is better. This is not a better movie, but this is more of a Christmas movie because we see the decorations. We see that Riggs goes to the house at the end and shares Christmas with them.
Right.
So we see all this stuff. We see people singing, the Christmas carols. You have all those police together, and you have that one lady cop who's trying to get them all to harmonize together. So
Right.
I feel like this is more of a Christmas movie than Die Hard.
And how come Gremlins isn't a Christmas movie
I was
either?
just thinking that as well, too.
That's for another podcast, Ed. We're not touching that one.
I'm starting to come up here with movies that should be Christmas movies that aren't. Consider a Christmas movie. Gremlins is totally
It was a Christmas
movie.
gift.
Exactly.
Yeah. I don't know. I'm on the fence on this one. Honestly, I like my Christmas movies a little bit more traditional, but I understand the arguments pro and con to why a Die Hard, a Gremlins, Lethal Weapon is or is not a Christmas movie.
We're going to take it back.
Take what
it's
back?
It's going to be a Christmas movie.
It's a Christmas.
He's doing a Clerks 2 reference right now.
Clerks
Clerks
2
2?
reference, yes.
Oh, okay.
We're taking
I
it
wish
back.
you would have took that
I
back.
know,
I wish you
know.
would have took
No,
that movie back.
absolutely not.
So for me, I
We're
could
taking it
really
back.
care less whether or not it's a Christmas movie. Would we consider Bad Santa a Christmas movie?
Bad Santa is totally a Christmas movie.
Okay.
Are you kidding me?
Okay, I'm
It's
throwing
got
that out
Santa
because
in the name.
I know. I'm just throwing it out because of the themes. That's all. But all right, let's roll into our reviews here. We'll kick it off with Ted, and then we'll end it off with Ken because this is his director. What are your thoughts, Ted? What do you think?
I absolutely adored this movie. This is one of those crazy times where I can get lost in this movie. I guess I have a complex relationship with movies because I can look past certain things on certain movies, especially if I like it. I can look past a lot of the craziness and silliness of the Fast and the Furious movies because I actually like those. This is so much better than the Fast and the Furious movies. But when it comes to action movies, there are things that I can overlook and it doesn't bother me. The things that are small here that I don't quite get or understand, I can look past that with relatively ease because I enjoy the movie. And Lethal Weapon is that. And that's what it is. I enjoy these two characters a lot. And the bad guys are compelling enough that you know that they're evil and you know that they're doing nefarious things and you want to see them come to justice. That's all you can expect from a really good, well-made action movie. Where this movie sets itself apart from an action movie is some of the acting in this movie. Mel Gibson's acting in this movie is really, really good. And you can see why it sets him up to go on to do all of the things that he's done in Hollywood up until he had some issues. He's a great actor. I will be 100% honest, going into this movie, I didn't know how I was going to be able to reconcile everything that's happened with Mel Gibson with how I was going to view the movie. And I can honestly say that this is one of those instances where we can separate the art from the artist, because he's really good here and it's undeniable. There's no way that you can sit there and deny how good he is in this movie. I mean, the one scene with him looking at the barrel of the gun, it got him to play the lead role in a Shakespearean play. I mean, come on. What higher accolades can you really get than that? I love this movie. I will definitely be watching it again. I'm sad that there was such a gap in between me actually seeing the movie and actually seeing it now. But I'm actually excited to watch the next 3 movies. That should tell you something about how much I like this movie. This movie's a B+. It's not an A because there are a couple of things that stick out that's like, oh, this could be better. But hey, this is 1987. We're right in the heart of the action movie boom. It's so much better than a lot of the crap that was made around this time that is just basically unwatchable. So yeah, that's where I fall in this. I absolutely love the movie.
Very cool. You know, actually, it's funny. Your review is dead on with what my review is. It's a great buddy cop movie. I don't know if I'd watch it over and over again. It's definitely far superior than a lot of the schlock and crap that was made in that era. Glover and Mel Gibson are incredible together as this buddy cop duo. There are a few things that are a little hokey. I don't know if there's a few things that really carry over today. I hadn't watched the movie in probably 10 years, maybe even longer than that. I watched it twice. The first time I watched it last week, I was like, I don't know. I'm on the fence here. I watched it again, watched it for a little bit more detail, a little bit more of the acting chops, a little bit more of the actual camaraderie and just how the movie flowed. And I liked it more. I agree with you, Ted. This is definitely a really good movie, but I don't think it's B+ quality. I think it's setting a precedent for the buddy cop movies, the 90s, 2000s, today that came along. But I'm also really looking forward to watching 2, 3, and 4. I really am. I'm looking forward to doing like broad comparison of these movies. I'm glad Ken brought this up. For me, this movie is a solid B.
I don't know about you, Eric, and Ken can answer this if he wants to, but one of the ways that I can tell how much I like a movie, especially preparing for the podcast, is if I'm going to watch the movie and it doesn't feel like a job. I actually enjoy it.
Yeah, no, exactly.
There's been a couple of movies where it's been like, oh, this is going to be hard to watch for another time.
Even the first time I watched it, I was kind of like a little bit on the fence. I still enjoyed the movie. It wasn't like it was a job. The thing that upset me was because when this movie came out, when I first saw it, I loved it. It was just rock and roll, rock solid movie. And I don't know anyone who had anything bad to say about this movie. Probably still today, I don't know anyone who has anything bad to say about it. So when I watched it recently, I was like, it just didn't have that pop for me that I remember when I first saw it. And obviously, different age, different eyes, different view. So luckily, when I watched it the second time, I had more of a love for it. Because initially, I was like C+ on this thing. But when I watched it again, and as we really talk about it, I'm definitely sticking with a solid B. It would definitely be something I would watch in the future. I wouldn't go out of my way to watch it, but I am looking forward to watching these 4 movies back to back. All right, Ken, take us home.
I agree with a lot of things that Ted said. I know you're all probably like, no way. But me and Ted barely disagreed on anything here. I agree. This movie didn't seem like work to me where other movies sometimes do. I think the comparison is when you watch it the second time. The first time, it's easy to like watch it and not consider it a job. Where it feels like a job to me is the second and third time watching it. And if I feel like I'm looking forward to watching it again, that's the key to the movie. For me being an enjoyable one. And this was one of those movies. I love this series. I love Mel Gibson and Danny Glover together. They are perfect. They're probably the best duo when it comes to the buddy cop movies. You want to see these guys together and you root for them. You don't want anything bad to happen to either character because of just the chemistry that they both have. It's kind of crazy for me to say this. It's kind of like the Everly Brothers. They're just in perfect harmony together. They feed off each other extremely well. So if I was comparing it to like a musical group, I would have said Simon and Garfunkel, but they hated each other. Richard Donner has talked about that there is a script, but the script was halfway thrown out the window because of how Gibson and Glover played off each other. they got into character and made it their own. And whenever that happens, usually good things happen into the movie, and that's what happened here. I picked this movie because I do think this is a strong strength of Richard Donner's. I didn't pick it originally because of the fact that I wanted to do a series. And now that we're switching off from doing just directors to a bunch of other things, I figured we would end our directors with Richard Donner and then kind of segue into, I wouldn't say new format, but into our second phase. But this is basically Richard Donner's best movie. Some people could say Superman, but to me, this is him at his best.
Toy.
The pacing is perfect. No, it's not the toy.
I was going to agree with you on that. As much as I liked The Omen and this for me are his two best. I like Superman, but I'm not as much as I like those two.
Right. And I would say, now that you brought that up, this is very much 1A, 1B with Omen and Lethal Weapon. I would actually say the pacing in this movie is better than The Omen, but The Omen just has creepy Damien, and who doesn't love creepy Damien, right? I love a lot of things about this movie, but it's not perfect. And Ted was just saying, you like Die Hard more than this? Yes, because the difference between this movie and, let's say, Die Hard is Hans Gruber. The Hans Gruber character in Die Hard is a much better bad guy and much more enjoyable to watch.
An incredible bad character. Yes.
Alan Rickman,
very incredible actor,
was a gift.
Alan Rickman just made that his own, and that was his first flick, and he did wonders with it. So that's where the difference is between those two movies. So I just wanted to say that. As far as my final grade, I agree with Ted. It's a B+. There's some things that could have been better, but I don't know how much more you could have done with this movie. There's nothing additionally that I would have added because they used their time well. I think the only reason why it's a B+ and not like an A-, there are just some other movies like Hans Gruber. It's just a little bit better than the bad guys here. I like Gary Busey, don't get me wrong, but I don't enjoy him as much as I enjoy Alan Rickman. That separates the two. Solid B+.
All right. Well, there you go, folks. We all pretty much like the movie for the most part. I think we're all pretty much on the same par with this one. So our next episode, of course, Lethal Weapon 2. I wonder if we're going to like the sequel as much as the original, and then the third, and then the fourth one, so stay tuned for that. Ted, where can they find us in the World Wide Web?
Well, we can be found on Twitter at @themovie_marquee with 2 E's. However you listen to us, if it's through Apple or Spotify or Anchor, rate and review. Leave us a 5-star review. It gets to be able to be seen by a wider audience, and it helps. And it's always great to see the feedback that we receive, whether it be ratings or if you take the time to write a review. The review doesn't have to be long. It can just be a couple sentences.
How about on Facebook, Ken? What's new there?
Okay, you could join us on Facebook, the Movie Marquee. You just send us a request to join, and we will look at your application, and we'll approve it. And we don't really deny anybody. The only time we'll deny you is if your Facebook page looks a little iffy. But outside of that, we're not
or if your
picky.
name's Elias.
Elias. Clerks 2 references, I'll tell you. I just want to shout out to Justin Cooper, who posted on our Facebook about 30 questions regarding movies. So some of the
I'm
questions
working
are
on your list, Justin.
Yeah,
by
that's
the way.
that's a hell of a
Jeez,
list you got
Christmas. That's a list.
Yeah.
Long list. If I wasn't editing podcasts, I'd be already done with this list. But it takes some thought, but it's enjoyable. I just like it when you guys come out and you share things with us. And we want to continue the conversations. And feel free, if you say, you know what, Ken, or Ted, or Eric, or the Movie Marquee in general, I didn't like this, or I love this, feel free to share. We like the bad info as well as the good. For instance, our episode of Singles, there were some audio problems, and we know it, and we apologize for those audio issues, and we're working to not let that happen again. But occasionally it does happen. Bear with us during those times.
All right. Well, that's all the time we have for this episode. Good night, and have a pleasant tomorrow.
See you at the movies.
See you next time at the Movie Marquee. Happy New Year.
Happy New Year.